The reason you keep hitting the same no is usually not your weakness or failure. You feel confused, tired, and that the world is unfairly closing doors. But this is not the end of the story. It will specifically elaborate on what signals these might be and how to respond. You go to an interview and hear, "We'll call you back," and then silence, and you lose confidence as if it's forever. You reach out to someone and get rejected, and each subsequent step feels increasingly desperate. Or you pour effort into a project that doesn't take off, and the only thought that comes to mind is to prove yourself, to try even harder. This is a familiar scene. Blood runs cold in your veins. Your mind cycles through justifications and self-flagellation. And beneath it all, a fatigue emerges that makes you cling to what no longer works. But there is a practical difference between not for you and not now, not here, not that way. In this video, you will receive not philosophical generalizations, but specific guidelines. How to distinguish rejection from redirection. What the first two steps to take immediately after no are. And how to stop wasting resources trying to reclaim what is leaving. Not because you are bad, but because the door is closed for another reason. I will present real reactions of the body and mind that show what hints you are being given, and provide a clear action plan so you do not get stuck in a cycle of attempts and disappointments. There is a moment when the ability to hear the hints of life is especially important. The world is changing faster. Familiar paths of work, relationships, and success cease to work the same for everyone. And this creates a new constant, an ever-increasing number of no's that must be taken into account. People no longer live on a single line. Careers intersect with personal lives, plans with reality, and refusals occur at every stage, from postponed promotions to interrupted connections. Therefore, the inability to recognize what exactly a refusal shows you today costs more than ever. It consumes time, energy, and faith in oneself. You are not alone in this state. Many people are familiar with insomnia before an important decision, with nightly rehearsals of conversations in their heads, with repeated attempts to prove their correctness to themselves and others. The first observation: when you keep returning to the same situation, your body accumulates chronic tension. Shoulders tighten, breathing becomes difficult, irritability increases. The second observation: your mind switches to prove mode, seeking validation of its worth in the reactions of the external world. And as a result, you lose the ability to notice external hints that could save you months and years. Here, we will make a video map to make it easier for you to navigate the material and return to the necessary part later. In Part A, we will analyze what a person feels when asking for more, what internal signals and experiences arise during the waiting moment. In Part B, we will look at how the mechanism of desires works and why it often pushes towards repeating old scenarios. In Part C, we will discuss the most common mistakes when wanting change, what prevents seeing the hints. In Part D, we will offer a new perspective on refusal as a redirect rather than a sentence. In Part E, we will show what changes in life when you start listening to these signals. And in the practice, we will provide specific steps you can take today. A new thesis that you will not hear in the hook. Refusal often preserves a more advantageous path for you. It just does not align with what you have envisioned. This means that the task is not to resist refusal, but to learn to read it, and to act in a direction that opens real opportunities rather than emotional compensations. Before we move on to describing feelings and mechanisms, remember, reading hints is a skill. And it can be trained just like any other practical skill, step by step. When you ask for more from life, the first thing that comes is the noise inside. It's not just anxiety as background. It's a multi-layered noise. Constant hints from the body, short bursts of hope followed by a swift drop, internal dialogues that flow into one another. For some, it feels like a constricted throat before a call. For others, it's in sleepless head replaying the same conversation over and over. It's important to see that this is not just an emotion. It's a signal about how your connection with desire is structured. The first experience is division. You already imagine what it should be, while simultaneously observing how reality does not match. In your mind, a bilingualism grows. One part says, "I deserve," while another repeats, "That's why this doesn't work." Tension arises between them. Often, this rift manifests in behavior. You become more insistent, start gathering evidence of your worth, and speak more than usual. The body responds predictably. Rapid breathing, muscle tension in the jaw, a surge of energy that is often masked as mobilization and pushes you to act. The second is the tendency to latch onto an image. You create a film about the future where everything is already right. People in those roles, you in that status, and this is very comforting. But when reality confronts you with rejection or delay, it's not so much the events that hurt, but the destruction of that imagined film. Then aggression towards circumstances arises, not because you are weaker, but because your semantic map has been shaken. The third, the inner dialogue shifts to explain mode. When you expect big things, promotion, love, recognition, your mind starts gathering evidence and scenarios that confirm you are right. It's like an internal lawyer who, instead of listening, writes closing arguments. As a result, you stop hearing external hints, warm suggestions, gentle refusals, which could guide you elsewhere. Instead, you only hear what confirms your picture. The fourth is the feeling of loss of control and attempts to regain it. The desire for more gives rise to a sense that you have a plan and a map, and any no is perceived as a mistake on the map. This triggers three typical reactions: an intensified attempt to push again, causing additional stress in trying to deserve, or retreating into doubt and passivity. Each reaction offers temporary relief and long-term exhaustion. Finally, a unique element of this chapter is a simple diagnostic marker that is rarely spoken aloud, but which you can feel within yourself: inertia of attention. Imagine an internal pointer that points to the desired and draws your attention, even when new data appears around. If the pointer doesn't switch for a long time, this is a sign of latching. A small mini situation. You write an email after the interview again and again, reviewing each line when 2 weeks have already passed, and the answer is clearly no. Your attention returns to that one event over and over. That is inertia. Acknowledging its presence is the first step to understanding what you truly feel. Not just disappointment, but also the fear of losing the internal picture you've constructed. Awareness of this inner noise allows you to distinguish the emotional reaction from the real signal that needs to be heard. Why does this noise occur over and over again? Because within us works a set of automatic mechanisms designed to conserve energy and seek reward. It is not meant to navigate the semantic subtleties of your plans. When you ask for more, several interconnected processes are activated: a forecasting system, a neurochemical reward chain, and social scripts inherited from past experiences. Together, they create that very energy that pushes you forward, while also blinding you to what changes direction. The first step in the explanation is prediction and the failure of prediction. The brain constantly builds expectations. When reality matches the expectation, you feel confirmation. When it does not, discomfort arises. This discomfort serves as a signal to act, to change behavior, to receive confirmation again. Therefore, your first reaction to rejection is to try to adjust the strategy or intensify your efforts. But here lies the trap. Instead of updating your worldview, you often pull facts to fit the old model. The second step is emotional reinforcement. Reward comes not only in the form of results, but also from hope itself. The anticipation of a call, a brief message, a minor advancement, all of these provide bursts of dopamine. These bursts reinforce behavior, even if it relies on illusion. Or, to put it simply, you get used to the very act of expecting and start repeating movements that once brought relief, even when they no longer work. The third step is social scripting and self-justification. We grow up surrounded by stories. Fight until the end. Show that you are worthy. Nothing comes easily. These stories support the mode of persistence, even in cases when persistence becomes counterproductive. The social context suggests to you that failure is a personal defeat, not information, and thus you feel the need to prove otherwise, sometimes at the cost of your own resources. The unique model of this chapter is the model of 2 gears. One gear is your desire, which gives direction and power. The other is the gear of reality, which resists and suggests boundaries. When the gears jam against one another, you feel intense friction, stress, constant thoughts, doubts. The skills we discuss further are not about speeding up one gear, but the art of adjusting the gears so that they either soften each other or reorient the movement in a new direction. And finally, the triggers of these mechanisms are often not just external events, but also internal unfinished business. Past approval wounds, childhood scripts of "you must earn love," unconscious promises to yourself and others. When these old programs are activated, even a small rejection brings to life a long list of confirmations of "I am not worthy." Understanding which machines are spinning inside you is the first step to hearing where life offers redirection and where it truly closes the door. A common mistake that intensifies the suffering from no is the attempt to overcome reality through willpower. It's not just about trying again, but nurturing the belief that persistence is itself equivalent to being right. This is not heroism. It is running in circles. You add effort, resource after resource, but do not change direction. Inside, it feels like pride and stubbornness at the same time. I will prove it, and I can't let go. And ultimately, you pay an emotional price. A specific mini-situation illustrates this mistake. A young woman invests years into a project that yields little response. She believes that if she does just a bit more, the written text will attract attention, and she will turn the situation around. She starts working 12 hours a day, misses meetings with friends, loses her sleep schedule. Outwardly, this looks like selflessness, but the internal logic, "if I am persistent enough, it should work," leads to emotional burnout and loss of perspective. At the moment when someone gently says, "Maybe this is not your audience," she hears it as betrayal rather than useful information. The second common mistake is misinterpreting rejection as an assessment of your entire personality. This is the mirror mistake. You expect the world to reflect your worth, and when the reflection is different, you take it as a verdict. Illustration: a candidate for a managerial position receives a rejection and thinks, "I am not a leader. while the reality may be related to the company budget or internal politics. The mirror mistake turns the situation into me against the world and blocks an analysis of the real reasons. The third mistake is ignoring signals for redirection. Sometimes life whispers, "Not here, not this way." Yet people continue to fight in the same direction because they fear admitting that their route has changed. The unique metaphor for this part is a package with the wrong address. You packaged your desire, sent it in one box, and wait for it to arrive, while the markings indicate that the address has changed. Instead of double-checking the address, you keep waiting and monitoring the postal notifications, wasting time and energy. The final important aspect is the inability to distinguish between emotional reaction and informational signal. Emotion comes quickly and loudly. The signal is quiet and requires observation. Mistaking them, you either give in to impulse or ignore important information. Understanding this mistake is a step towards stopping the amplification of the problem through your own reaction and starting to read life's hints rather than fighting against them. Imagine that rejection is not a brick wall, but a switch at the crossing. This turn changes everything. You stop perceiving no as a sign of your inadequacy and start seeing it as information about the route. This is a shift from the question, "Why is this happening to me?" to "Where can this direct me?" And here a fundamental shift in perception and behavior occurs. A new perspective begins with a small mental exercise. Shift the emotional coloring of no onto a neutral scale. Your task is not to ease the pain, but to learn to treat rejection as data. When you hear, "We will call you back," try not to imagine the drama, but instead ask yourself a purely analytical question. What other options open up if this is not the channel? Such an approach reduces the intensity of emotional reaction and shifts energy from trying to prove something into exploration. The unique model of this chapter is the replacement compass. The compass consists of 3 arrows: the direction of desire, the limitation of reality, and a new goal that is born at the intersection of the first 2. You do not abandon your desire. You look for where it can be realized with less cost and greater efficiency. For example, a person who has been trying for years to get a role in a major theater hears no. Instead of continuing the struggle in one space, they use the compass, shifting focus to directing or educational projects in the theatrical environment. Externally, the goal remains connected to theater, but the method of realization has changed dramatically. Another important shift is recognizing the cost of what you lose if you cling to the previous option. This is not submission, it is calculation. How much time, energy, and relationships are you willing to spend on something that may never happen? By acknowledging the price, you gain the freedom to choose consciously. This changes the tone of action. From a frantic "I must," it turns into a pragmatic "I try" and "I test." In practical terms, reorientation does not require dramatic decisions. Start with a question that shifts the focus. If this window has closed, what other window might have opened? This is a simple turn, but it replaces the old logic of struggle with the logic of exploration. And in this chapter, there is no promise of easy transformation, but an invitation to a mindset that perceives rejection as a navigational tool and as an honest course corrector, rather than a sentence to defeat. When you really start to listen to the hints of life, changes do not happen instantly, but they are systematic and noticeable. The first thing that changes is resource savings. Instead of endlessly fine-tuning the same strategy, you begin to redistribute your energy to a larger number of tests You try new formats, new audiences, new contacts. This is not a metaphor. It is a practical effect. You spend less fuel on patterns that do not work and more on what provides feedback. The inner landscape also transforms. Previously, you might have lived in the strain of expectation. Now, tension is replaced by a state of exploration. Curiosity, not blame, becomes the main tone of the inner dialogue. This is noticeable in simple things. You become less fixated on one outcome, listen to feedback more broadly, and quickly adjust your hypotheses. Externally, this manifests as a new ease of communication. People feel that they can interact with you not through the demonstration of status, but through collaborative problem solving. A unique example of the outcome: an entrepreneur who relied on one major client received a rejection, and instead of panicking, went to listen to the market. He discovered a niche of related services, and a year later increased his revenue while reducing his dependence on one client. This was not an instant success, but a consistent series of small steps made possible because he accepted the redirection signal. Furthermore, relationships with oneself and others change. You stop demanding confirmation of your own value from those around you because you have learned to read signals differently. This means fewer dramas, fewer attempts to control outcomes, and more real conversations about perspectives. In personal relationships, shifting focus from trying to make the other change to reading compatible directions often frees one from cycles of resentment and jealousy. Finally, there are measurable changes in sensations. Imagine a scale from 0 to 10, where 0 is constant anxiety and rigid fixation, and 10 is calm persistence and flexibility. People who begin to listen to the signals of life do not always jump straight to 10, but they often rise by 3 or 4 points. These points mean more free time, less emotional expenditure, and more opportunities to see alternatives. So, by listening to life, you not only save resources, you increase the likelihood that your desires are fulfilled in forms that serve you better than the initial, obsessive scenario. There will be no philosophical musings here, only specifics that you can start applying today. Below are 4 actionable steps, clear and feasible. Each step is designed to reduce energy-intensive loops and redirect resources into testing and experimentation, clearly without pomp. Step 1. The 2-minute check micro habit. Every evening, take 2 minutes for a short entry. What did I try to achieve today? What did my environment respond? And what might that mean? The entry should be 3 lines: event, reaction, fact. Clear conclusion, 1 sentence. This habit trains the transformation of emotion into data and reduces attention inertia. Step 2. The pivot question. When you hear no or feel a repeated rejection, ask yourself one question. If this window is closed, what is the nearest window I can open without significant investment? Answer briefly, no more than 1 sentence. This question shifts energy from struggle to exploration and helps quickly form an alternative that can be tested. Step 3. Action every day. Choose one small action related to the alternative and do it daily for a week. This could be sending 1 email request to a new audience, publishing a short test ad, calling an unfamiliar person in a related field, or writing a draft proposal for a new format. Important: the action should take no more than 30 minutes. The goal is to test a hypothesis, not to conquer the world. Step 4. A way to notice progress and stay on course. Keep a simple result scale: harm, neutral, signal, confirmation. record what result you got for each test. If in 2 independent tests the effect is neutral or worse, change direction. If a signal or confirmation appears, increase investment. To avoid slipping back into the old model, prepare an if-then rule. If I feel a strong urge to return to the old path, I state out loud one phrase. This is a signal, not a sentence. And make a 2-minute entry from step 1. These 4 elements work as a small system. The micro-habit translates emotions into data. The pivot question opens alternatives. Daily action tests hypotheses. And the scale and if-then rule help see progress and avoid falling back into old patterns. Start with 1 cycle. 2 minutes in the evening. 1 question after rejection. 1 interaction per day. And record the result. After a week, you will evaluate. And, most likely, already see where life offers redirection and where it makes sense to persist. The main takeaway from this video is that a refusal is rarely the end. It more often serves as information, a sign of a boundary, a hint about another direction, a tool for recalibrating actions. This change is not the goal, but the way to achieve it. If you change your attitude towards no from a verdict to data, you save energy and start acting more precisely rather than more forcefully. Second, to hear these hints, you need a simple practice of attention and a rule of action. The mechanisms of our mind tend to cement the familiar picture and provide dopamine from anticipation. Therefore, dramatic solutions won't help you, but a sequence of small checks will, turning emotions into facts and quick tests of alternatives. This reduces the risk of burnout and expands the number of workable options. Third, the meaning of changes is not to surrender to difficulties, but to stop wasting resources on what does not provide feedback. Redirection is not a defeat. It is a saving of time and respect for your own resources. A conscious choice between continuing on the same path and switching to a test is the mature strategy for achieving what you want. In conclusion, remember, the ability to hear life's hints is a skill that is trained through simple steps rather than moral lessons. Start with the smallest thing, 2 minutes in the evening, and 1 question after a refusal. This won't change everything overnight, but it will provide a different, more effective rhythm for decision-making. And when the next no comes, you won't react frantically. Instead, you'll calmly ask, where could this lead me next? If this video was helpful to you, subscribe to not miss the next day.